Kia ora everyone. So this video is just going to be a quick recap of what we did in the first class for those of you who have missed it or just want to re-go over this again. So what I'm going to be doing today is showing you how to set up a project, a PCB project in Altium, and how to create and start editing a schematic. And we'll go over things like finding components, how to link footprints, how to do annotations, and how to generate a bill of materials, or BOM as it's known. Right, so I've just freshly loaded Altium here, and it has nothing open. There are no projects open here. So as you can see on the left hand side here, we have a panel called projects, and that's going to list all of the projects, PCB projects that you have open in your design. So if you don't see that, there's some tabs here on the bottom. Just make sure you have projects here ticked. But if you don't see this panel at all, what you can do is just click on the view menu here, click on panels, and make sure that projects here is ticked, and that should appear. Now these panels can be moved around the Altium window. So if you just click and drag this bar here and holding down the left mouse button, you can see that it can be placed in it snaps into different spots on the user interface. You also have these little icons here to help you do that. So you can see I've just moved over here or onto that side. So it's quite customizable. You can have multiple panels in different places. Like I can click the components tab here, I can click and drag that and move it over here, or I can move it inside the panel here, but I would recommend having it one on each side, depending on how much real estate you've got on your screen, your monitor resolution, for instance. Right, I'm just going to move this back, and you can now see this appeared here in this tab list. So we'll go back to projects. So what the very first thing we want to do is we want to create a new PCB project, which will have a schematic document in there and a PCB document, which is like the bare minimum required for a PCB project. So to create one, we're going to go click on the File menu here, go New, and then Project. And that's going to bring up the Create Project window here. So on the left-hand side, we have locations. Click on Local Projects. So that means that the files for this project are going to be stored on the local drives of this computer, or of your computer. These other options are for cloud storage, and we're not going to use those. And here in the middle we have the project type. So Altium comes with a bunch of built-in templates for various things, but we don't need any of that stuff, so we're just going to choose default here. And then on the right hand side we have the project name and the folder of where, or the location of where the files for your project are going to be stored on your computer. So in project name, I'll just call this exercise 1. And then under folder here, just click on these little 3 dots to bring up into the project location window. And from here you can choose where on your computer to store your files. I've got a folder here called exercise 1. I'll just create a new folder in here. Go into there and choose select folder. And then all we've got to do is click create. Right, so now that's done that, on the projects panel here you can see we have our exercise 1.prjpcb. That means it's a project PCB file. Now this file here is the project file for your project, and this file stores all the information about what documents and files are part of your project. And below that you can see no documents added, so we don't have anything there yet. So the first thing we want to do is to create a schematic. Now we can right click on the project file here, and we can go add new to project and schematic. Alternatively, you can click on file, new, schematic. Now if you're to do this, just make sure that you have this project file here selected. You don't want to, otherwise you could add it to another project if you have that open. So I'm just going to right click, add new schematic, and now we have a new schematic, blank schematic document here. It's called sheet1.sch doc, or schematic document. Now you'll notice here that the exercise project file here has a little asterisk and a little red folder icon here. So that means that the file, in this case the project file, has been modified but has not been saved yet. And the schematic document here, it does not show a asterisk or a red icon here, but it hasn't been saved either. So the very first thing we want to do is you want to save it. So you can see up on the top here we've got some save icons. Either save the active document, sorry, or save all documents. But we're just going to save this manually. So we're going to click on the schematic here. I'm going to go File, Save. And now we're in our exercise 1 folder, and we're going to give the file, or the schematic document file, a name. Exercise 1, and it's going to automatically have a .sch doc file type, or schematic document. Click Save, and we still haven't saved our project file yet, so it's going to go, well, I'm going to click on it and make sure we select that, go File, and then Save. Nope, right click, and save. There we go. So now everything is saved. Right, so we can see we have this schematic filter panel here, which we actually don't want. So we're just going to right click on it and go Close. Right, so on the bottom right hand side here we have a Panels button, and this will give us access to all the various panels that we have available. So if you want to add, say, I don't know, comments, for instance, or schematic list, you can just click on that to bring that panel up. So if you close one, it's pretty easy to bring one back again. So what I find useful, what I would probably recommend, would be on the left-hand side here we have, say, your components and your project, and on the right-hand side, properties. The properties panel is going to be used quite a lot, so I would recommend keeping that on the side here to have it always available. Now if you kind of have low screen resolution, or we don't have enough screen real estate to fit this in very well, up on here we have a pin icon, and that will pin this panel to the side. So if I click on that to unpin it, when I click away, it kind of folds back there, and you can just click this Properties button here to bring it back out again. And if you want to keep it fixed, you can click on Pin, and it is now stuck there. You can also resize to get it to fit, and just customize it to your needs. So when it comes to schematics, we need components to wire into this schematic. So if we go down to the Components tab here, this is going to bring up the list of components available to your project. Now up on the top here we have, you can see it says miscellaneous devices, .intlib, or integrated library. If you click on this box here, it will bring up a list of projects or libraries that are available to your project. So your project can have, you can add various libraries to it that are specifically needed for your project, and you can also install libraries that are available to all projects that you have open. So if you click on this operations box here to the right, this here will allow you to add and remove footprints or libraries and components to your project. So I'm going to go File-Based Libraries Preferences here. I'll just bring this over. There we go. Right, so here we have the file-based libraries. Now, file-based just means that these are library files that are stored locally on your computer. Now we have these tabs here on the top called Project, Installed, and Search Path. So in Project here, this is going to have a list of all of the projects, all of the libraries and footprints that are available to your project. If you click here on Installed, you'll see we've got a bunch of libraries here that are available to all projects. And we saw that when we clicked on this miscellaneous devices list here, and that showed these components. And so this has the name of the library, whether it's activated, as in whether it's visible or not, and the path. And type is, in this case, an integrated library. You can have a PCB library or a schematic library. So all these libraries have components in them that we have access to. So I'm just going to close this, and it's going to click on here, and you can see, well, it will choose, say, miscellaneous devices, and that will have a list of all the components inside that library. You can see them all here. Or I can choose a different library, like say this custom one, and there's a whole bunch of components in here as well. Right, so we're going to add a library specifically for this exercise. Now it is on the Moodle site. If you go onto Moodle here in the exercise 1 first PCB section, we have this integrated library here. So if you can click on that to download that file, and I'd recommend storing it in the same folder that your PCB files are in, just to make it easier to find. So to add that, we're going to again click on this little box here. In the Components tab, I'm going to go File-Based Libraries Preferences. And I'm going to go to our Project tab here because we want to add this library just to this project. And click on the Add Library button here. And I'm just going to go find that file, and here it is, Altium Exercise 1 library. And go Open. And it is now added here to our library. So I'm going to close that. I'm going to go back to Components tab, and we can see Altium Exercise 1 library .intlib, or integrated library. I'm going to choose that, and these are the components inside that library. Now just quickly, a integrated library is a library that has a schematic symbol or schematic footprint, and for that component it is also going to have PCB footprints and also 3D models and various other important files like simulator files or other things, all integrated and stored into that one library file, so you don't have to have separate libraries. So it's a great way of organizing them. Now one thing we can also see here in our projects panel here, there's now a new folder here called Libraries. And if you expand that out under Compiled Libraries, we can see our integrated library that we just added before. Right, so this here is the schematic that we're going to be drawing, and all of these components here, the connectors, diodes, fuses, all that stuff is all in the integrated library, all those components. Right, so the first thing is we need to start laying down some components. So I'm going to go to Components here. Now you can see that it's chosen miscellaneous devices. We don't want that. I'm going to click here and choose our integrated library. And the very first thing we want to do is add a 2-pin header for the power header. So you just double click on this here, and that is now going to place this component into placement mode. As you can see, it's moving around with my mouse and it's a little bit transparent. That signifies that it is ready to be placed. So when you left click, it is going to place that component, like I've done here. And you can see I'm still in a placement mode that allows you to place multiple components at the same time. To get yourself out of placement mode, just right click, and that ends that. Now We can just click and drag to select these components we don't want, and just press the delete key, and we'll just delete that as well. Now, alright, so we'll just bring this up. You can see that our connector is around the wrong way, so we can rotate that around by just left clicking and holding the left click mouse button down, and by pressing the space bar, that allows you to rotate the component 90 degrees. I'm going to place it this way, like so. Now, to zoom in and out of the schematic, you can use the page up and page down keys to zoom. You can hold down the right mouse button, and while you're holding that down, hold down the left and move the mouse up and down, and that gives you a more precise amount of scrolling. So hold down the right button, hold down the left in that order, and then move the mouse up and down, and you can see it zooms in and out. So that's a nice, quick, easy way to zoom around. Another option is to press the Z key on the keyboard, and it will bring up the zoom menu. And a useful one is to zoom all, which will zoom all around just your components. Or you can press Z again and choose sheet, and it will just zoom just to the whole schematic sheet. So when it comes to placement, another thing you can do that's very useful is we want to say to flip the component around. So if you can just press and hold the left mouse button like this, and you can press the X key, and it will rotate it around the X-axis, and the same with the Y-axis to flip the component around that way. Right. So what's next? Now we have a diode here and a fuse and some wires. So we're going to go find our diode here, our Schottky diode. Double click on that to place the component, and we're now in placement mode. Just place it where we would like it, and click. Left click, right click to exit the placement mode. And there was also a fuse. I'm going to find our fuse here, double click, place it with the left click button and right click to exit placement mode. Now we want to add some wires. I'll just click and drag this to bring these closer. Now you can see on the top here we have this little bunch of icons, like as a shortcut to very common tasks that you'll be doing in Schematic Entry. Right, so we can do this multiple ways to place a wire. We can right click, we can go place, and we can go place wire. And you'll see here Control W is also a keyboard shortcut. Another way is to find the wire symbol here. Now if you look closely, you can see for these icons here there's a little triangle, a little grey triangle on the bottom right of the icon. That means that there is multiple options. So if you click and hold the left mouse button, it will bring up various options. So we want to choose wire, and that puts us into wire placement mode. And you can see this little cross here around our mouse, and a smaller cross, which is to signify where the wire is going to be snapped to. So I can bring it over this point here, and you see how it has changed color to like a little dark blue. That means that that is a point where you can place a wire. So I'm just going to zoom in, and you can see this little symbol here and the end of this black pin, and that means those little 4 dots means that it's a snap point for placing wires. So I'm just going to zoom out. You can see there's one here and one here, and it wants to snap to it. So if I click on this, and then that puts us into wire placement mode. Now you can see I can just click here to create a wire. Now you'll notice when I was placing that wire, let's go Control W to place another wire. You see on the bottom here, oops, on the bottom here it says Shift plus space to change mode, 90-degree start. So there is various placement modes for placing wires. It's also the same with PCBs, but we'll talk about that in another video. So I press Shift, hold down Shift and press space, and you'll see that our placement mode is now changed to a 45-degree angle. I can do it again, oops, and I can have a free placement mode of any angle, and again to a dotted type or auto wire. We won't cover that. And then back to our 90-degree mode. I think for readability, 90 degrees and occasionally 45-degree wires are the most legible. So we'll just stick to 45 degrees. Right, so let's have a look at what we need to do. Now we can see here we have this ground symbol, or ground net. Now with Altium, nets, or like a ground net, is a symbol that are all internally connected together. So these grounds here, these ground symbols, these wires, this wire here, all those wires, this one and this one, they are all connected together as far as Altium is concerned. So when you create your PCB, this is not a separate wire going nowhere. This is connected from here to here to here to here. So these are all connected. It's the same thing with power nets. This one, this +5, this one doesn't go anywhere, but if I place that net on another location, that would be the same thing as drawing a wire to that new location. So they're internally connected. So doing this just saves you having a million different wires all over the place and just makes it a bit easier to manage and easier to read your schematic. So to place ground, as you can see on the top here, this is a very common power port or common power thing to place. If I click and hold, you can see there's some other built-in types, but we're just going to choose ground. And again, we're in placement mode. You can press space to rotate it around, and we're just going to place one down here. Right click to exit our placement mode, and we're going to place a wire by click from here to there. Now to edit these wires, if you want to delete them, you can just click on it and you can see it will bring up these little green boxes. Those are the points that it has snapped to the snap points of pins and components. And you can click on that and you can move it about, drag things as such to rewire or change any mistakes you've made. Ignore that little squiggly line, we'll talk about that later. Again, click on here to place a wire, right click to exit placement mode. Right, what else do we have? We have this component here, an LM7805, that's a voltage regulator, which you can see here on the side, and a polarized capacitor, which you can tell because that little plus sign there, and a non-polarized capacitor. So we're going to go find our 5-volt regulator, our LM7805, double click to place it here like so, right click to exit placement mode. Now this here we're going to click and drag just to move it up to the side to make it a bit more readable. And we're going to place our two capacitors, so find our polarized capacitor, double click, and we need to rotate it around, so press space to rotate, and we'll place it here, right click to exit, double click on our plain capacitor, a non-polarized one, space to rotate, and like so. And then we're just going to place our wires, place wire from here to here, and then from here to the top here. Now if I'm just going to zoom in and point out something, you'll notice, I'll just place that, you notice a few things. You see that this, it might be a bit hard to see on your screen, but this here, this pin is completely black, and then it changes to blue, a dark blue, which is the wire. Now if I click on this wire, you can see the snap points. A common mistake, and it's quite easy to make, is to overlap the wire to the pin snap point. So if I just drag this away, A common mistake is to accidentally not place it here where it snaps, but let's say over here, and you'll get this this junction here, and the blue of the wire going on top of the pin, which is not good. So just click on that, and now you'll notice that just that green box is there and the dotted line, that's just the selected part. If I press delete, it's only going to delete that section there, not the rest of the wire. And then we're just going to place another wire to fix that. I recommend going from the snap point to the wire here, and you can see this little round circle. That is called a junction, and that tells you that this vertical wire here is connected to this horizontal wire. There's an electrical connection to there, just for ease of readability. Like if I had a wire going across here that wasn't connected, it would look like this. There'd be no junction. This wire is not connected to this wire. And we'll place our, let's press Control W there, place our wire to here, and now we need to add our ground wiring here. Another place you can access if you don't have this, or this is a little bit messed up, you can access all of these placement things through the place menu on here. So you can place our power port, our wires, components, various other things. So I'm going to place our ground port, I think in line with this one here, down here. And then I'll place some wires to wire that up. Now you can see these little red squiggly lines. That's saying that you have multiple components with the same designator, C question mark. We'll talk about that in annotation a bit later, but just ignore those marks when you see those at the moment. Right, so our last components, we have a resistor, an LED, and another power connector. Here, so we're going to find our resistor, double click to place, press spacebar to rotate, and click, right click to exit, go find our LED, and we're going to place that as well. And then we have our 2-pin connector, header 2 here, double click, just now the right way around, so we're just going to place that here. Now we'll just wire this up from here to here, there to there, and we have a ground down here, and we have another ground. Now another thing you can do here is you can copy and paste components. So I can select this ground, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, or I can right click on it and get access to cut, copy and paste here as well. So I can select components, Control C to copy, Control V, and I can paste that like so. Now that there is our rough schematic. We've now got to set up all the parameters and footprints for each of these components. Right, so now we're going to talk about component properties. Now each component here, we'll just click on this one here. When you click on a component, it will populate this properties panel here on the right hand side with the properties of the currently selected component, like this fuse for instance, or this regulator. So we'll go back to this 12-volt power connector. Now each component will have a designator, in this case P question mark. Now every component in Altium needs to have a designator, and it helps that each designator is different and unique to all the others. Now a common designator for connectors is P, the letter P, like P1, P2, P3 for instance, and the annotation is something we'll talk about in a bit, how to automatically generate these annotation numbers. You also have a comment, which is what we can see here, our 12 volt power. In this case, it is our 12 volt power input, so we'll just leave that as that. And you can type in a description here, just to describe what this component is, like 12 volt power input, for instance. And down here we have the parameters section. Now this is where we choose what footprint to use for our component and various other parameters like part number, manufacturer's part number, when it was made, all that stuff. So here under footprint, I'm just going to expand this out to make it more visible. This shows a list of all of the footprints for that component that have been added in the integrator library or in the schematic library. So if I click on this, this has a list of various footprints that have been added to this library. In this case, we're going to choose, say, a 5mm terminal block to be our footprint. To the right of that, we have the show button. If you click on that, then it's going to bring up a preview of the footprint. Let's click to display preview, it says, so we're going to click, and it's now loaded a preview of what that component looks like. There's a little 3D box here that will toggle between 3D and 2D views. If I click on that, that now gives us a 3D view, and we'll go back to 2D. So we can look at, say, some of the other types of footprints that is a part of this library. And we're going to go back to our 5mm one. And you can click hide here to hide that. So every component that you have, every schematic component, needs to have the correct footprint. A very common mistake when making PCBs is to accidentally choose the wrong footprint when you create your PCB, and you might not realize until after that PCB has been made, at which point it is too late. It is a very, very, very common error or mistake to make when making PCBs, is choosing the wrong footprint. In this exercise, it doesn't matter because we're not going to be making a PCB. This is just showing you how to do schematics, but here we'll choose our diode. Click on here under the parameters footprint. Choose a suitable one. And the same for all the others. Now, there is a default one that is selected. We're just going to leave that at the moment because that doesn't matter. So the next thing would be annotations. So we have like D question mark, F question mark, U question mark, multiple C question marks. We want to give these names like C1, C2, R1, etc. So to do that, we're going to go up to the Tools menu up in the top here. Click on that, and there's an annotation section. And from here, this gives us various options of annotating our schematic. The quick and easy way of doing that is to choose this one here, annotate schematics quietly. And if you click on that, it's going to tell us that there are 9 designators requiring an update. Now, for it to know that it requires an update is because there's a designator with a question mark at the end of it. It means it hasn't been given a number yet. And we're going to go yes to proceed with changes. And now we can see our components have designators C1, C2, etc. Now, when it said annotate quietly, what that means is that if I go back to annotation here and go annotate schematics, it's not going to bring up all this stuff here. This allows you to have full control over how the designator numbers are generated, and how in the what order in the schematic, and you can have full control over adjusting that. We don't need to do any of that, so that's why we're going to go Tools, Annotation, Annotate quietly. So now if you add a new component, let's say another capacitor, by default it will have these question marks on the Now, if you find that you want to restart and you want to reset all of these annotations, you can go Tools, Annotation, Reset, Schematic Designators. And what that's going to do is say, right, there are 9 designators, reset, and it's going to go and reset them back to question marks. Now you'll notice here, this little grayed out part in brackets, that is to tell you what it was before you made that change. So it allows you to manually change things if you wish to do so. But we're going to go back to Annotation, Annotate Schematics quietly, and go back to our annotated schematic. Now, one thing I probably should have mentioned earlier, we'll go back to our projects, is we need to regularly save our work. So all this work I've done at the moment, nothing has been saved yet. So if Altium crashes, which it does occasionally do, and it's not the most stable program in the world, it doesn't happen all the time, but it can happen. You don't want to lose your work. So it's going to go File, Save, or what I recommend, because we've got multiple files we need to save, we can go Save All. Go this button here, or we can go File, Save All, and it has now saved everything. Right, so we just need to finish off with the some of the parameters for these components. Now our connector here on the end needs to be called a 5-volt output, and that is in the description, so just click on the component in the properties panel here, bring up the properties for that component. Now our comment, that's what appears over here. We need to rename that, we'll call that 5-volt power, like so. Now these parameters can be clicked and moved around to make things more legible. You can hide them by just clicking on the component here, and you'll see this little eye symbol, and by clicking that with the crossed out one, that hides it. So you can toggle designators or comments, anything with this eye symbol next to it, you can toggle on and off. Right, so now that we've done annotations, the last thing is to show you is how to generate a bill of materials. Now our schematic is finished. We have all of our designators, our footprints have all been set, even default ones. So to do that, we're going to go to the Reports menu up here and click on Bill of Materials. Now that's just going to bring up this little window here, and it's going to give us a preview of our BOM, or Bill of Materials. We have these columns, which is the comment section, or comment parameters, the descriptions, the designators, the footprints, and the quantities of each of our components here. And in the rows here is each of these individual components. Now we need to save that or export this into a nice readable file. On the right hand side here we have export options, and we can choose a file format. It's very common to save as an Excel file or a CSV file. You can save it as a PDF or web HTML or other things, but we're going to choose Excel. Under template, there's a bunch of built-in templates that comes with Altium. I'm going to choose BOM default template 95 because I found this one to be a nice one to use. And we have options here. We can add the bill of materials to our project, as in our project files here. And we can open the exporter file when it's finished, which I'm going to do that. Click on that. Now we're not going to click OK, because if we just click OK, that's just going to save these settings and then just close the window. When we need to export the file, we need to click the export button here. And that's going to bring up the window of where we want to store it. I'm just going to go here, say in our project outputs folder. I'm going to call this exercise 1 BOM, or BOM for bill of materials, and click save. And it is now, you can see, generating that file. And we're done. Click OK to close that. And now we can see, that's right, we did not choose to add it to our component, to our project. So another little shortcut here is to access these files is you can just right click on either your project file or one of your internal files inside here and go explore, and it will bring up Windows Explorer or File Explorer for Windows to take you straight to the location of where those files are stored. And I saved it in the project outputs file here, folder here, and here is our Excel bill of materials file. So I can load that up, and here we see our bill of materials. This is the information that we saw in that preview, and all this fancy looking stuff around it is what the template generates. And it just fills in some information like the date and time and file name and stuff like that, and all of the relevant information. Okay, now this is pretty much it for today. It's sorry for being such a long video, but you can always just go back and redo various things and have a look at anything you may have missed or need to go over again. Otherwise, just ask me for any questions or help, send me an email or contact me through the Moodle forum, and I'll do what I can to help. Catch you later.